Okay. So the seeing of non-duality is the seeing that there is no one. It's the end of the experience of being a human being, moving through space and time. It's the seeing that there is only wholeness and hi. Hi. So it's the end of identification with the mind, which is just the thought stream, and which is seen to arise spontaneously, and the body as well is seen to appear, but it's not who I am. All identification ends. There is no ultimate self. It's not about finding something else to replace that. It's just seeing that this is here and not here at the same time. So everything is real and not real. So there's everything and nothing. And so the boundary between inside and outside goes. So there's just what is happening, and there's someone else. And the essence of that is love. So this can come as a real shock, the most gentlest shock in the world, because it's so natural. It's the natural state of being. It's what we were born into. It's just no differentiation. The skin before was a boundary line between me and everything else. So that vanishes. And often this happens in two stages. So that, oh hi. So there's often a first awakening to emptiness, and emptiness is the seeing that there's absolutely nothing, that no form exists, no table, no chair, no other, no person. And yet all this apparent material existence just appearing. So the formless and the form are seen to be one, Shakti and Shiva, form and formless. So it's just this one thing. And it's only seen when the self is not there. And this seems to create a massive shift. There's always a before and after, and so the mind loses its supremacy. The mind was, the center of everything was this mind. That was my mind and my desires and my life, and that falls away. And there's no loss really. It's cognitively, it seems like a loss when you talk about it, but it's not a loss. It's the restoration of intimacy, so that the love itself is just an overflowing intimacy with everything that is. A little bit like falling in love, in that there is no boundary line anymore between what's here and what's there, and there is no here and there anymore because location completely dissolves. So there is no where, and so this is everything you've been searching for, whether consciously or unconsciously. There's always been a search for this. It's like the end of desire, the end of looking for fulfillment. Because this is already fulfilled, this is already everything happening for no one. and it's more than enough, and so it's peace. And so all the energy that was consumed in the mind stream is released, so that you can finally be where you are, which is just, again, it's just where you are is enough, and it's complete. And so that afterwards, the mind might completely dissolve in this and never come back, or it might come back in part, but it is always slowed down, so, and it's always background, so it never has the same, it is not, you realise how irrelevant it kind of is to life, in the sense that it's just resting in what is, and seeing that reveals the sacred dimension of life, which is visual and very, very beautiful, and stillness is seen and experienced. So some people really slide into this very, very slowly, and they don't realise that it's the case, especially after the seeing of emptiness, because it can just be disorientating in the sense that you don't know what you want anymore, because particularly metaphysical desire, which is desire for status or prestige or intrigue, tends to fall away, so that the fantasy side of life tends to die down. It's more about just being with whoever you're with. If you're with somebody, it's more about just being directly merging with whomever you're with. So you become an open space for whatever is arising, which is great. So there's a honeymoon period that can go on for months or years even, or indefinitely, but mostly it kind of goes on for maybe a couple of years, and there's just a wanting to sink into this wherever you are, but somehow I do think it does prefer nature, or there is a desire to, I think that's why people gravitate towards benches and so forth, just to sit and look at a tree or the sky, whatever, because you're seeing everything for the first time, and everything, a tree is not the same, a tree seen through the mind is not the same as a tree seen through the eyes of oneness, because it is infinitely more rich, and it is sacred, and it is just so much more beautiful, and everything is seen as perfected. So that everything is like almost like a work of art, if you like. It creates absorption, so whatever you're looking at, there's a being absorbed into whatever you're with. So you can kind of sink into this, particularly when you're in a state of non-doing. It's much more noticeable. So some people have problems, the mind can continue to doubt afterwards for a while, and people look sometimes for verification, and even then the mind can be very tenacious and create problems, but after a while, very often that can die down and just disappear. So so we're born into wholeness. We are born into this, and some of us remember the moment at which we start to identify and recognize ourselves and have images and discover the mind, which is very often disturbing. Most of us suffer from the mind, which is why most of us end up with these talks, is to look for the end of suffering. And is this the end of suffering? It is the end of, for most it's the end of neurotic suffering, for the endless kind of worrying, kind of neurotic fears tend to go. If real problems arise, then real problems arise and they have to be dealt with and they can be difficult. But suffering doesn't keep a hold like it did, so it tends to just, things arise, worry arise, but peace prevails, so peace tends to be where you live most of the time. If you have a distorted view of reality, depending on the kind of trauma you have, if you have some kind of trauma, then that can persist. So you may not know, you may be in bliss and you may still be relating to the world in a kind of distorted way, slightly. So afterwards it can take a long time sometimes for some people for certain patterns to unwind as well. So it's not always the be all and all. But there seems to be a tendency not to desire to change the world, and that sort of kind of tends to pull away. There tends to be much more acceptance. So there's a radical acceptance of what is. So even if someone's a complete asshole, there's an acceptance that that's what they are. You may not want to deal with them or whatever, but you're not trying to change people because you realise there's nothing you can do in a way. You know, this is how you are. No one can make this happen, so everything's just happening, everything's just appearing. Yeah, so it's the end of seeking when love is seen. But relative, I mean, it clears away as well, because after a time some people want to return to the world and do something with their life that sort of bring their life into alignment with this, which tends to be much more organic and more in tune with their original nature, whatever it is that hasn't been before conditioning kind of overlaid that. So maybe desires you had when you were young, or qualities you had that never got seen, never got actualized. So in a way, it can be a fast track to actualizing things in the world that you were too afraid to do so. So it can be like, it can get you to a place that therapy would take years and years and years to do. But yeah, so but for those that it happens to spontaneously, and so it is just like stepping into sanity. It is, there's the space and the clarity to kind of to understand the mind and to understand, almost to understand as well how you got to this point in a way as well. So the past is kind of redeemed to, although during the honeymoon period it's probably unlikely that you would look at the past because that's appearance, but it's still, the character still lives in space and time, but the timeless is foremost. So it's just, presence is where you live, but time can still be accessed. So, but the time-based individual falls apart. So there's still this character, and it still matters. It's all kind of paradoxical in a way, because it still matters a great deal what happens, but the self itself seems weightless, light, and just appearing, so that it doesn't, at one level it doesn't really matter what happens, at another level it does, because there's still the relative to live. But What else can I tell you? So, is that long enough? Anybody? Yeah, so some people have struggled after the seeing of emptiness if they have it that way, because there is just the loss of desire and drive, and nothing tends to move you anymore. So there's just going through life not feeling without, kind of rudderless, without an orientation, and if you know about non-duality, you will probably feel quite hopeless, because you realise that there's no one who can bring about love. It's either seen or it's not seen. So, and also around this time as well, there'll be a lot of energetic experiences too. So, psychic experiences, all sorts of strange phenomena can occur, and so it's quite an exciting time. Trying to remember. Has anybody got any questions?
Can the drive return just because it's just returned, or it's not tense, it's just the character's interested in something?
Yeah, well, desires can return, but drive, that kind of willing, energetic, whatever it was, tends to dissolve and not come back. So it seems it is more like a kind of natural movement, I suppose, rather than a sort of drivenness, because there's less investment in outcomes in a way, because everything is, you're less likely to embark on something just for an outcome. So it would be just more moving towards but yeah, desires do, otherwise there'd be no one speaking about this as well, like, because there is something in us, I think, that we need to express who we are. That's part of being authentic, which doesn't always coincide with awakening. In a sense, you could be awake and not in touch with all of your emotions. So being authentic is about being in touch with your whole emotional reality, which is what corrects the distortion of, distortions of reality occur because we're not in touch with that. That's why we end up in situations where we're abused or abusing others, or misinterpreting. But yeah, there generally will be, but probably more healthier desires, less in terms of status and again, like the metaphysical stuff, less in terms of that, because that's seen through, because the equality I've always seen, the humility, that there is no difference, and between here and anywhere else, it doesn't really matter who, and also that projection, the projection onto the one at the front goes, but other projection can still take a while to unwind. And I think also, if you haven't really embodied this or integrated this, there can be a little bit of that projection left. So it's a good idea to integrate it, to really know, what how life is for you, to really be able to express that some way in your life. And also because speakers do give different takes on this as well, subtly, but yeah, you really do have to annihilate all your favourite teachers. You have to annihilate everyone in your mind, and then, yeah, there's a real freedom in that as well. I think when you go beyond caring about non-duality or whether it is or whether it isn't, and there's a real starting to think for yourself. That's part of being authentic as well. Because a lot of people stay in rooms like this and pretend they're not awake, like, and but I think at their own detriment as well, because you gotta, you know, if you come into your own power, that frees you up to do stuff with your life as well, and you know, because a lot of people get stuck in relationships, in certain jobs, and you know, you can be awake and in a kind of prison as well, like in a relative sense, without realizing that. And I think it's finding greater wholeness in the psyche as well is a good idea, because one without the other, it's like, so that you can bring your whole life into this as well. It's like but yeah, that desperate, that drivenness, which is often based on rivalry and competition and all that, that tends to go. So seeing the others having more fun, or seeing the others, you know, having made it, or all those kind of fantasies collapse as well. It's like, you just know suffering doesn't care about prestige, suffering doesn't care about status, you know, like, to be human is to suffer. So. And yeah, so there's no free will in a sense, but in a way there is stuff you can do as well. That doesn't mean that you can't change things either. So that one often gets people, because it's realise that everything's just arising, and you know, but if you do want to change things, there are certainly things you can do if you know how. But again, because some people talk about deepening, but I don't think, for me, that it's not the seeing of non-duality that deepens. There's just the seeing of that, and what deepens is, well, the psychology can deepen. You can see more, become aware of more, which is great, and also the idea of the past just being a story. The past, in a way, is so useful for understanding everything in life. Once you really get to grips with that, you can really see what's true as well. So it's, for me, that's a really important thing, to be able to confront your past, and to kind of to feel what you didn't feel, you know, to have the appropriate reactions to what happened there. Stops you acting out in life as well, stops you scapegoating others, projecting onto others, because, I mean, I suppose that's part of the Christian thing, was, yeah, religious stuff as well, is that, you know, the myth was always about the voice of the mob saying, you know, like an Oedipus or something, like, you know, you slept with your mother, you know, you've killed your dad. But like in the Christian myth, it was more like seen from a position of innocence, as in there was nothing wrong with Jesus or whatever. So it was taking the position of the innocence of our scapegoating mechanism. I'm thinking of René Girard here, but that's the one thing that non-duality doesn't necessarily give you if you don't integrate. It's like being able to see that we have these natural drives to scapegoat others and to project onto others, to try to really assimilate the shadow, our own hate, our own greed, our own fear, and which is always there, but once it's known and it's seen, it's just not acted out on in the same way. So but it can be difficult in relationships, so can often, waking up can certainly change that. I think a lot of relationships can fall apart as well, because it does, if you're with somebody who's playing games as well, it's, you know, there's not the same response, because it can often be seen through as well. So there's, it can often end up with that sort of change, particularly like, it's more, there's not many stats on that. I think with near-death experience, for instance, 85% or 80% of divorce rate is 80% after something like that. So it's quite high. A lot of people have awakenings during them, obviously, because they're pretty much dead. Although death is a process. So yeah, life is really, really tough. And and then you wake up to this, and it can be really difficult to think of a problem when you wake up, and especially initially when someone says the word problem to you, you just laugh. It's like, I can't imagine what a problem would be like, but because the psychology can just completely be detonated, it's just, you know, time collapses, so there's that wonderful thing of just whatever's arising you're just totally with, and then you're with something else, and you're with something else, and wholly absorbed in that, so that, you know, there's not that thinking about just what's happened or something. It's just, it's all now, it's all just now, and the richness is where you are, and there's no kind of remnant of that afterwards. Of course, in relationships, whatever you've got, if you're going through a bad patch, there will be, but, you know, or whatever, if you're having a real struggle, but generally speaking, it's just the richness is where you are, and there's no beyond to that. And for some people, well, for a lot of people, emotions are felt much more extreme, and they move through more quickly, and so with anger, unless you're a narcissist, of course, in which case you'll still probably be have anger as a fight response in trauma. So it just, some trauma wounds do not heal. Some of them are very difficult to tackle, so you might still be angry. You'll probably hide it. But yeah, it's strange. The emptiness, sometimes it can still seem quite strange and stark when you sort of look at it and sort of think it's so, like, it just feels like, I said before, like you could just walk off a cliff. It would feel like there'd be nothing, you know, like it doesn't really matter. Like, in a way, it's so, I don't know, so beyond the physical, so beyond the mental. But I do find that, because there's states arise in this as well, like samadhi states, not for everyone, but for bliss states, and you can really sink into this, and I find that in, wherever there is, you're in a situation where there's nothing, you know, nothing to be done, it's like, it's kind of dropping deeper into this, which is nice, very sweet. You can be very, I can be almost too open at times. I think initially you're just so walking around smiling at people. How people seem to respond sometimes. You sort of initially, yeah, you just, because all the defenses are kind of blown, and if your heart's been closed, it can take a while to get used to your heart just being open, like, because you don't really, you know, there's no escaping from that, you're just vulnerable, you're just open, but it doesn't feel vulnerable, but it kind of is, you're just so with somebody, and it also is quite hard to tune someone out as well, because you're just absorbing what's going on. It's actually quite hard to remember how it was, that sort of constricted sense in some ways. Not that I don't want to remember it, like, but, you know, but yes, sometimes afterwards it's like what you haven't kind of dealt with comes and hits you smack in the face if you haven't dealt with your issues, you know, because you're so at peace and everything, and it doesn't mean to say you've got the tools to negotiate life, so you can come across obstacles as well, which is interesting. There's kind of no escaping it. Even without the mind, it's like, it doesn't make life easy. It depends what you had before, in a way. So.
Yeah, that resonates with me. I don't feel like I have a question, but I have, like, you know, identification and reflections with some of the stuff you say, and that if you haven't kind of dealt with your stuff, it'll just come back and get you, you know. Yeah. I find that because it's because balance and centre is so mostly the way it is for me. It's very easy to find my way to that. You know, when something shakes me, it's only going to be a matter of time before that, you know, the resonance of that kind of disappears off mostly.
Yeah.
And then it just goes around on this very wide arc and circle before, you know, eventually it's going to come back through again. The train comes back through the station, but it's almost like it's I don't know if it's a disadvantage because but yeah, that thing about being practiced at finding centre and you know, being that I'm identified mostly with that experience means that it's also very easy to not look at something.
I was going to say that's a really good point, because actually in a way that can be like a negative thing in a way, because you don't need to go there, like you can just fucking bliss out.
Yeah.
And you're not facing that shit, and that shit is getting worse maybe. And I've experienced that, and it's like, it's almost like it's worthwhile kind of, I don't know, making sure you check in with something. Like if you were in therapy, you've got an hour a week, or if you've got a friend who's a confidant.
Yeah.
Yeah, because otherwise you let things drift, and you can do that for years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, if you don't happen into a space where you're sort of authentically accountable, you know, if that's not part of your setup, then it's very easy to live a life where you know, old shit, man. You know, old shit is still around. You know, 98% bliss, or 98% peace, maybe.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's so. That again. Yeah. When it comes through, you know, because it's like, it's the oldest. It's the oldest thing.
God.
Because I'm so able to, just like you said, just step out of that and step back into that place of being centered, and it's a blessing, it's a curse as well as a blessing, I guess.
Yeah.
You know, well, actually no, because I wouldn't trade how it is, but still, I can't underestimate or you know, kind of underplay how really fucking disappointing and it is when I get faced with that part of myself that says, oh man, you still haven't sorted that out.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it's almost like, because in the old way it would be like you just suppress something, you push it down and it's like a negative, but this is like, you're just opened up, aren't you? And it's like there's a temptation just to stay in a situation that's just not serving you. Because you can. Because it's okay. Life is okay, right? Yeah. But actually, if you were going to choose, you wouldn't choose to stay in this, right? And then,
it's that kind of, you know, the motivation thing that we were talking about, that drive thing, without experiencing suffering particularly, you know, you're not pushed to do that thing, you know, to do that work or...
That's interesting too as well, because a lot of the energy for change is anger, isn't it? And as well, so you're like, anger will make you tell someone to fuck off or put down a boundary, but if you're kind of okay, you're not manifesting that. That, you know, you can, and actually, what I find I'm finding with other people is if they have a confidant and they're talking things through and through, you know, they're changing psychologically anyway, and somehow that can be a way through. But if you're not, like you say, if you're not doing that,
if you can radically accept and unconditionally love anything, it takes the edge off that. Yeah. You know, that red hot poker of change.
Yes. Absolutely.
So yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point, because nobody really talks about that, and you know, and I've known people who've been stuck for years in really bad situations, but you know, it's okay. You know, I'm free. Yeah, you wouldn't be choosing this, like, and it doesn't. you know, sometimes as well it's that distortion too, because you don't know what you're in, or like there's a part of you, if you've got that sort of idea of yourself, like I'm a peacemaker, or I'm a, I don't know, I am the loyal friend, I am the I don't know, whatever, this baggage we carry, like you can kind of get stuck to. Yeah, it can be difficult to be authentic. It's funny. It's a funny one. Yeah, but it's a hell of a lot healthier than disassociating or repressing shit. Like, but
yeah. I mean, it means that I don't sit in toxic situations. The problem actually isn't the situation that I'm remaining in. The problem is still. It's still in here.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, this is fine.
Mm-hmm.
I can balance this, but still.
Right. Yeah.
Still, every so often I get presented with that room that never gets cleaned out, or you know, it's just like, oh, come on.
It almost feels as if life is presenting you with the one thing that you've tried to escape. You know, it's like you're gonna meet it, like again and again and again. You know, until you sort it out, whatever it is.
Yeah.
I think it's not much talked about, but I think we all negotiate that, like.
Yeah.
And probably some people just their whole lives just kind of coast.
Yeah.
And okay, so I feel samadhi more when I'm having a cup of tea. Well, I'm gonna sit around and have a cup of tea, and I'm fucking looking at this shit, like.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like it's set up to just play the opposite game on me now.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it played the game of suffering, forcing change.
Yeah.
You know, and I made that move from that, but now it's like, oh, okay, so you can do that. Okay, let's see how you react to pleasure. Let's see how you react to equilibrium. Let's see, you know, if we can just kind of intoxicate you into submission almost, you know. Yeah, very interesting.
Yeah.
Because that drive thing that we spoke about, you know, without that, it is very easy to just go, yeah, oh, okay.
Yeah, but also I think actually, I mean, for those of us who have sort of pushed their anger down and they do get in touch with it, it can infiltrate that as well, and it can, because if you don't have strong boundaries before this, my God, you're going to need them. You're going to need to erect boundaries, and that's the key to it, is your no, you know, like codependence, we all find it difficult to say no. Most of us do anyway, because we're living in a society that's polite, etc., etc. But yeah, it's tough. And particularly when the mind is gone as well. I mean, when there's no mind there's no problem. There really is no problem when the mind is gone. It's like, yeah, anything's okay. You know, it's just.
You mentioned how it helps to have a confidant, and last time you mentioned about verbalizing can create neural pathways to get used to speaking from feeling. Is that how you said it?
Yeah.
Can you say a bit more about that and how that's connect? Because reacting is not the same. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, it's learning to respond. Yeah, so if you're dealing with, particularly if you're dealing with trauma and stuff, because a lot of people say, you know, just stay with the feeling, and feeling is just that, just being with the emotion, whatever it is. But on its own, it doesn't seem like it's enough. We also need to emote, which is to express it. And so when you express something and you feel, you're connecting the cognitive side of the brain, the left side, with the feeling, the right side, and that's creating the new neural pathways. And you know, so that's more harmony, it's more integration, more health, and again, that's changing your psyche, so it's changing your inside, so potentially that's changing the way you're going to move as well, because I mean most people's problems is they're just not in touch with the emotions, and if you can't make decisions, that's where it's coming from. You're not in your feeling. So meditation is good, it connects you with it. Yeah, just having a confidence, somebody can go, for fuck's sake, really have a good moan, like, and feel it, as long as they're not dumping on someone, which is just, you know, yeah, it's a different kind of energy that's kind of abusive. But yeah, having a real kind of share is really healthy, and it can really shift you, that whatever you're stuck in, and you start to recognise more and more of your experience as well, because otherwise you don't know, you need to put words to this as well. It's not just about the emotion, it's just like exploring how it makes you feel, you know, what's going on, you know, it's bringing it both together is seems to definitely have an impact.
If you want to do that and your confidant isn't available, can you write or say it to yourself? Does it have the same effect?
Well, it's I think expressing to someone else is more effective, but yeah, even inwardly, yes, and externalizing it is the best way. But if you don't have anyone, yes, it does make a difference. So like having a rant at whatever it is, your parents or whatever, and yeah, and just owning it, because it's about as well, like allowing yourself to be angry where you feel it, rather than acting it out or else displacing it onto someone who's actually got nothing to do with it. So yeah, it is good just to allow yourself to, as long as you don't get lost in the internal loop of that, yeah, because I think it can go too much that way. Again, people who are into mindfulness, it goes too much the mindful way as well. But yeah, writing it out, uncensored writing is good as well. Just totally getting rid of the superego stuff, or inner critic, which is a toxified superego, because that's the voice of the your caregivers. You've internalized part of the thought stream that's not who you authentically are in a sense. So it's getting rid of that, bugger off to that, and just writing and kind of excavating.
So that's what this superego is. It's the inner critic.
Well, the superego is actually just the internalized. It's kind of like the conscience. It's created from your parents, from rewards and punishments from them. So you learn what is right, you learn what is wrong, and if your parents are particularly the worst they are, which like if it's called an inner critic when it's become toxic, and the more toxic it is, the more berating it will be, self-hate, shame. I'm shit. You can't do anything right. And it can really, if you don't deal with that, it's really hard to get to the emotions, because it's so powerful. It will swamp your real feeling underneath that and who you are. So it's worth dealing with that before you deal with any of the underlying emotions, because lots of people have problems with that. Like very few of us have had good enough parenting as well. Like so.
I think as far as expressing that, I feel like these days, I don't know, I think for me, I think either an audio recording or a video recording would probably be a better energetic dump for me than sitting and writing. You know, you can, as if you're talking to somebody else, you know, you can powerfully rant at full power into that. And I feel like it, for me, it would communicate both the language, but more importantly, the energy, in a way that maybe writing would not.
It's the opposite for me, because if it was power of words, isn't it? So if I'm stating how angry I am about something, if I'm saying that back to a reflection of me, it's coming back at me. If you need to get it out, not put it back in, you might
You don't need to watch the clip, you just...
still, I don't know, for me that was...
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's going to be different for
Yeah.
everybody.
Would you feel like it's aggressive towards you then?
Not so much aggression. Well, maybe I just feel like anything that is, like if I'm looking in a mirror, I'd be doing positivity or affirmations, not trying to get my feelings out towards someone or towards something that's made me feel bad. So I feel like it's just bouncing in between me and me. Then you know,
Okay.
It's not actually gone on a piece of paper which I've later burned, or I've not let it go. I've just reabsorbed it. I looked at
Okay.
myself during that time.
Right.
Do you know what I mean? Like it wouldn't. That's just personally though. When you do a lot of recordings, I would need to either have someone else there or because I think once I get going with talking as well, I go off on tangents quite a lot.
Right.
Because I don't have the ability to think. So
Right.
I just go and go to the point where I probably just end up talking to myself for 2 hours and not feel any better at the end of it. I'd have to write something down, burn it, and let it go. You know.
Okay, so that's a different one because you don't. Is that because you don't have a thought stream then?
Maybe, yeah.
Okay. Can I say? Because it's not
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
Okay, so this lady, Jen, you've always been awake and you didn't realise you were awake, and
Apparently so.
yeah, and you've never had a thought stream.
No, I don't have it in a voice at all. Apparently it's more common than you'd think. I didn't know until I found out a few weeks ago that it's, I think it's like 1 in 10 people don't have an inner thought at all.
Is it as much as that?
It's common, yeah.
Oh really? That's
I said it in a group of about 60 people a few weeks ago, and there was 4 of us. And they didn't know it was that some people did have inner voices.
wow. Okay.
Yeah, and they have exactly the same experiences I do. And they were like, we don't really understand what anyone's talking about. And I'm like, I don't know about this. Because we just go along with it, because we're like, oh, this must be something with that. Yeah.
Is it at all like? Because I know you mentioned Gary Webber, and
Yeah.
I went down that rabbit hole, and he said something like when he's tired at certain points, or his blood sugar levels low, and then a little bit comes in. But is it nothing?
I suppose with music I can kind of hear the music in my, because I've been trying to like see what you experience. So I've been trying to like hear music in my own head, and to me it just still comes up as notes or colours or pictures. So I guess that's the closest I can get to it. But that might be the reflection thing as well, because I don't have the inner dialogue. I need to get it out, otherwise I'm just. So maybe that's me. Maybe that was just me. But.
So you need to get it out, like what anything that you're feeling, you need to express it.
Yeah, I mean normally I just dance or something, but
Wow.
I guess right, you know, you just get the feeling out, because if I keep it in, it wouldn't come back around. Like what you were saying, for me, it would just stay until, like if it's still there in 24 hours, I have to let it out verbally, or because it's a feeling for me, it's not a thought, so I don't really know what's making me angry.
Right. Okay.
I'm just like, I'm really angry. It's probably not something the boss done. And I'm not sure what it is, so I have to like, and then I'm like, oh, okay, I feel better. So I can't imagine what it's like to have that going over in your head, you know, to have to write it down or to speak to something. Or
Do you think it's like that the way animals shake off their trauma?
probably, because I
Yeah.
have more than people, so maybe, yeah.
Did you talk to the other people who
Yeah, and
any insights or like?
they were the same as me. They had no idea that people had an inner dialogue.
You're right, okay.
Because I still say like, oh, I think so. I don't think so. I feel so, I guess. But I think you feel so too, it's just that you also have the thinking process.
Yeah, it comes and goes with me, so long periods without it, and then
Nice.
initially there was none for a long time, but then so because I find it quite pleasant when it's, you know, as long as it's not like problems.
Yeah.
But so it's hard to imagine what it's like to have never had that in a way. So it really is interesting. But I if I was to estimate, I would have thought it was like 1 in 1,000 or something. I didn't realise.
I'm sure if there was stats out there, it might be higher, but I was shocked when I seen how many people I now speak to about it, and they're like, oh, this is a thing. Like, and they're also like the same as I did, I used a lot of alcohol or drugs to try and numb that down, and when it was when I stopped doing that I realised, oh, this is what I felt like before, and it's okay. And they're doing the same thing, a lot of them.
Whoa.
Yeah, like trying to get the voice or trying to feel, they don't know what they're missing, they feel abnormal.
Oh, of course, because thought dilutes or it suppresses the feeling if you're too in your head. Like,
and because we don't have the ability to think it. That's why I love these sessions, because it baffles me, because it's all kind of about thought in a way.
yeah, it is. Yeah.
And it's really interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can now understand why watching that recording would trouble you.
You said that,
See,
and my body went, no, don't do that.
Because when I make that recording, when I press play, the moment it starts playing back, I have a present moment thought that is going, fucking hell, I was really angry then. I mean, and it's like, oh, go on, Bob, yeah. But actually for you, you're just reabsorbing it. It's like,
and we're just going back into, I'd be stuck in a loop forever.
Yeah. By me doing that, it actually, I kind of go beyond it. It leaves, and when I see it, it doesn't. I no longer identify to it in the present moment. I'm where I'm at, and I'm like, oh yeah, look, that was good. You know, I was there. But for you, yeah, without that broadcast, you're just kind of almost constantly on receive in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow.
Do what they said, not what I said.
There was an article about it in The Guardian, about people who don't have voices or who have strange voices. Like,
Okay.
someone had an Italian couple bickering. That
Right.
was their voice.
Wow.
And I noticed that it's not always a thought. It's like an energetic pattern. Like, let's say, I don't know, somebody pays me a compliment or something, and I'll notice like this expansion, and then I'll notice a bit of a reflex. Like, it's not a voice necessarily. There can be a voice, but it's just a pattern, because what I've figured is that when I was little, that it wasn't okay to sort of puff yourself up or feel that sort of like a
So what are you saying? What, you don't get much thought, or like?
I think less than before.
Okay. Is that since the seeing event? Well, it sounds like you've seen emptiness, isn't it?
It's over time.
Yeah. Because it's
But
something shifted in you, hasn't it?
Yeah. So I notice more detail of how things are playing out.
Right.
But what I was trying to say is that I notice not always thought that distorts. There seems to be just built-in reflexes and sort of, I don't know what they are.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure. Energetic, kind of.
Give too much happiness. There's something in there that's not language based that says,
Right.
just tense up a bit now. What you were saying earlier reminded me of like what they're saying in trauma, like healing, that you've got to have your center, so being in the oneness or something, and then touching what you call, I think, the psychological, the
What?
issues, the emotions,
The issues and stuff?
and then it helps to move between the two. So a little bit of blissed out, and then a bit of
All right, so it sort of contracts again, does it with you? Then it sort of, or not?
I think, like without intending to like heal myself, I noticed that the shift is doing it naturally. It's like, oh, be a bit blissed out now, and then, you don't like this. Okay, let's get blissed out again.
All right.
And then that seems to help just undo.
Oh, is there a pattern? Do you notice? Are you noticing stuff falling away then, like
Yeah.
like old stuff that?
Yeah,
It's just
I guess
coming off
you could call it falling away. I don't have a good language for it, but it feels like something's unwinding or something's.
Oh right, okay, that's pretty good. But it sounds like it's escalating a bit, because the way you talked before, it sounded like not so much bliss, but more kind of just sort of the desert, you know, like what to do, you know, less moved by things.
And it seems messy though. It's like there are periods and.
All right, so it's not. There's no kind of natural rhythm to it. It's just.
I'd say there's like the big shift, and then there's like little. Like sometimes there is something that needs to be worked through, and then sometimes it's like, oh, okay, nothing much going on. Life's fine.
Do you talk about it at all, or are you kind of alone with this?
It's a bit of both. I keep thinking it'd be nice to have a therapist, but then I think the therapists I've tried, it's just too much thinking, and it's like, this is not helping. It's like that. It's like that. The mind is noisier than mine, so it's like it's like almost I'm holding space for them, and then I just get really, and then it takes me days to sort of.
You could get an awake therapist, or you know.
Well, I'll definitely take the number.
There are enough of them about, and yeah, because I think it's important. Well, like at least if they know about it, but if you're really sensing that they're in their head, you know, it's probably really important. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then I think if I were really awake, then I'd be okay with it, wouldn't I?
But that's that thing as well when you said about, you know, when you're trying to, like, when you're focused on healing, that there seems to me a total attachment to trying to just get to a pleasurable place, right?
Mm.
And yet you said what happens more for you now is a bit of this and a bit of that, which is just kind of the natural state, you know. I see this quote here behind you, this Lang quote, and it says, you know, the only pain that can be avoided is the pain that comes from trying to avoid pain.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And that's almost that being focused on healing is that, right? It's that, I should be just blissed out the whole time.
Mm.
That creates its own pain.
I think that if I did, I think there was a period I was doing that, and then I thought, this is bypassing. I'm just avoiding.
Quite good fun bypassing. Not everybody can bypass. It's a luxury.
Master it and then stop it.
Yeah.
It's good to know that you don't have to put up. So you can have preferences like, don't want to have a noisy mind right now.
What you mean? Oh, that it's not compulsive thinking.
If I go to a therapist because I want to deal with some stuff and it's annoying me, trying to put up with it is probably just an old wound of like, I have to work hard at making this work.
Yeah, that could be a mistake.
Mm.
Yeah, and there are, like I say, there are awake therapists out there, so Okay.
I guess I don't advertise. Awake therapist.
Talk to you afterwards about that. Anyway, yeah, because otherwise you might have a few sessions and you'll be sat there thinking this is great, and then they'll say something to you and be like, oh no, you know, we really don't get this. Or else you get pathologized, you know, if they don't know about this, because a lot of them do, but if they don't, yeah, and you sort of, yeah, that whole dissociated thing, or it's, yeah, it's difficult. And then that could be part of your psychology as well, like if you're someone whose parents never understood them, and you, for the rest of your life, you're looking for a partner who doesn't understand you as well, and then you look for a therapist who doesn't understand you, and you're like, yes, I feel really comfortable because you don't get me. You'd be stuck in that for 10 years. Like, so, yeah, it could be part of the pattern. Like, so, yeah.
Don't want that.
No, it's a lot of money, like, to be misunderstood when you've got your friends, you know, you've got your, whatever. Yeah.
The woman mentioned, you mentioned about seeing music as shapes or colours. Is it called synesthesia? Is that something you experience as well?
I've had experiences of that, but it's not my ongoing experience. But I have had experiences of it. Post realization. I know you get it ongoing. I know that people who have MDs get it, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know how common that is to you, but yeah. And the near-death experience, it's really massive. That, like, 'cause you communicate in smell or sound, whatever. Yeah. Why do you ask? Is that something you've experienced? Or?
No, I was just curious.
Yeah.
I have, that you mentioned last time about smells that aren't there, incense that isn't there.
Yeah.
I have had that quite a lot.
Okay.
But I don't know if for you it was at what stage it was, or if it's an ongoing thing.
Well, for me, because I had sort of, it's always a bad word, and non-dual circles, a Kundalini process, but I've had two, so I had a second. My second Kundalini process started 3 years ago, so ongoing, you know, light phenomenon, visions, energetic stuff, you know, different experiences. One of them was internal sounds. That's quite a common one. So for me, I was hearing birds chirping inside. Well, not inside, just, you know, they weren't in my bedroom, you know, birds in my bedroom. Yeah, people get bees and waterfall sounds or other kinds of sounds. So and I've had this incense smell. I've had smells that are not present, and it can be really, really beautiful as well. Have you experienced that then? So
yeah, sometimes I'll be like, when we were at this retreat, we were in a forest and we kind of went off to like do forest bathing, and I could just smell this really strong incense. There was someone right near me, and I asked them, "Can you smell that?" And I'm like, "No, it just smells like forest." And also sometimes I wake up from dreams with like a really strong incense smell, but it's not there.
yeah, around dreams it can be interesting, because just even coming out of the dream, you can just wake into an experience. I've done that where I've woken up and there's just multicolored planets around. It's like, multicolored planets. But yeah, never spell thing, but yeah, I guess because you're so, I don't know, relaxed, whatever. That's nice. It's pleasant. I mean, it's pleasant, isn't it? It's just.
Yeah, I like incense. Lucky.
The celestial music and stuff is supposed to be absolutely awesome. Really. but I've never experienced that. And some people get that ongoing. It's really amazing.
Yeah, I know someone who said that.
Oh really?
Yeah.
Right. Ongoing or
Just once.
just once?
Yeah. She said it sounded like angelic.
Yeah. Some of the stuff is just not off this world, like, or not off the normal senses at all, just so beyond that. Yeah.
So it can happen pre-realization as well.
Yeah, that's it was always used to be like Kundalini was seen as something you awaken this energy to wake up to oneness, whatever. But actually, it can happen after awakening, during, before. There's no, and it sounds so. If you haven't experienced, it's not called the Kundalini process unless there's ongoing energetic phenomena or ongoing light experience. So it'd just be one-off experiences. They'd just be, energetic experiences or Kundalini experience. But a process is just tends to last your whole life. So like for me, it's inner light that just is always there. So other people, they just feel the energy moving through their body. Yeah.
Yeah, I've had energy up my spine, up and down sometimes.
Right, okay.
Usually if I'm just like really still.
Oh yeah, that'll do it. Yeah. It likes stillness. That stuff comes up. Yeah.
Lots of jerking, like spasms.
Kriyas. Yeah. It's called. Is that the normal ones? Your leg
Yeah.
just go through there.
Yeah.
Not mudras. Because again, spontaneous dancing or well, yeah, what do you call them? Yeah, some people get spontaneous dancing when they're walking, and I've heard of that.
Yeah, there's someone who had mudras, but it was like really fast. It's almost like sign language.
Oh, what, you did actually get the big
Someone I know, they had it once.
Oh, okay.
Just saw them doing it, and I was like, what were you doing? No, I don't know.
Because someone said that the sort of yoga moves were based on, Kundalini movements and stuff. I don't know anyway, but I did have them quite similar just before my awakening. I did have some quite extreme kind of yogic kind of positions going on when I was in a restaurant in a hotel bar in the Seven Dials in London. And my boyfriend was going, please go, please. I knew how it was looking like, but I had enough awareness to know that the waiter was kind of uncomfortable. No, I just wanted sex. It felt so good. The energy just seems so strong. Like it's just wow. It feels nice to move your body certain ways, and they seem to be very sort of symmetrical and whatever,
I wonder if all of the things like colours and hearing things, or basically anything just discussed, is something we already know, and then we lose it because, like, when you look at people who hear voices in like the medical professions and stuff, it's 9 times out of 10 a trauma, like someone should deal with a trauma that can lift away, and they are quiet then, and their soul goes too. So it makes me wonder if we're all like inherently in, through generational trauma, passed on these voices and these thought processes and these not being able to see colours as music or feel colours. I mean, this sort of
the trauma blocks it somehow. Is that what you mean?
yeah, like once you're once you're born or you're a little more awake and you know who's around you, you inherit these trauma blocks, and that's when you start thinking and start hearing music and not feeling colour. Do you know what I mean? Like it's up. I wonder if that's part of it. If you can learn how to unhear yourself, surely it's something that we've learned at some point.
I would sort of go with the whole idea of like we've incarnated, like you've come from that realm where it is all that, it is just it kind of goes with that, doesn't it?
Mm.
Like, but then, I mean, people like Gary Weber, who's, I don't know if you know him, you mentioned him, you know, he woke up and no thought whatsoever, but he never mentioned any experiences whatsoever. So I mean, not necessarily, but maybe he's very left-brained, he's quite intellectual. I don't know, because it's got to come from the right hemisphere, hasn't it? Because that's pre-language. It's just
Yeah. I just wonder if it goes, like, if it is a genetic, if it's, do you know what I mean, like genetic trauma is passed on. Like if hearing yourself is trauma. It sounds quite traumatic to me. And I feel like if you can unlearn that, which people can, like, I've seen with my own eyes people who are come off medication because they're hearing voices that aren't their own voice, and they go through their own process of doing it holistically, and then it's quiet. They don't even hear their own voice anymore. It's almost as if that trauma's gone. So I wonder if it is something that we learn. It's is it making sense? Like it's an embedded trauma in us, and for some people it doesn't quite hit that like level of this is staying with you for life. For some people it can ease off, and for others they have it for life. But
I can see you doing a meetup.
We'll all just sit in silence.
You can do workshops and you make a poem, like that sounds really interesting.
I just have thought maybe it's because like colours with music and stuff, I feel like if you can have those experiences, like it shocked me when you said if you had that, or like the smell that you had, to have those experiences, whether they're far in between or whatever, it means you can have them. So to me that doesn't feel like a left or right thing, that feels like an inherent thing, that feels like a oneness thing, and being back in touch with who we were, who we are, what we are, whatever we are. So if we can just zone in, just be that, then that all these little nitty-gritty things would go away.
Well, maybe because you would probably have more insight for that coming from where you are if you've never had that. So you're much more in touch with what it's like to live totally devoid of that. Like so maybe you're onto something there. Like
I feel like if it's what people seek and it happens when people start to wake up, then it's a possibility that it's a learned behaviour. Thinking, not being aware of the world inside the world, or what the other world, or whatever it is. Because I can't think. Sometimes I talk before I can.
Right,
okay. You know what I mean?
yeah, totally.
I just wonder if it's something that everyone seems to have learned, and it's trauma based. It really does sound traumatic to have this voice. All this, doesn't sound peaceful to me or pleasant.
It's more peaceful without it, even if it's non-intrusive. There is much more. It's juicier without it. Like I think.
Because then the space for smells and colours, and because there's such emptiness that maybe you can access things that you couldn't access before because you've got that room instead of thinking over the smell that might be there.
Well, they say that
isn't there, but is, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, they say. You tend to get more Kundalini experiences if there is emptiness anyway. So that's part of the process as well. They always pick it like that, and that makes sense. But to me, it seems to be it's chicken and egg, isn't it? Because when those experiences arise, you drop really deep anyway.
I don't feel like the voice is bad though, because sometimes when I'm writing or doing something creative and I come up with a really cool thing, I heard it in my head first. So I wouldn't want to get rid of that, because that's part of my creativity. Or the creativity.
I just like ideas.
Yeah, I mean, I hear your idea that you know the way your brain works is kind of like maybe the original factory default setting. But you know the process that you spoke of, this coming to a state of awakening, or was for my my kind of way that I try and describe that is it was a bit, it felt like a reset, you know, it felt like coming back to I felt like it came back to the original factory default.
Right.
Until I heard that. And then I'm like, well, okay, so it didn't do that, it didn't reset the fact that the voice still exists in my head.
Right.
I mean, when I talk about the quality of that voice, one thing that has happened is, since then, the quality of that voice and what it speaks about and what it focuses on has improved to a point where it causes me no suffering anymore. You know, it's
okay.
Radio Bob is a pleasure to listen to. Whereas in the old days it was focused on problems and stress and you know, stuff that would create a chemical state in my body that was non-desirable. And now, you know, whenever I tune into myself, you know, half the time I'm not listening, but when I do listen to him kind of playing down there with his building blocks, he's mostly singing happy songs or working on kind of positive ideas, you know, about how we can, you know, create more love or more wholeness or something. So the nature of what the broadcast is about now has changed completely, and, you know, often it's very useful, but the voice is still there, I guess, the whole time. But I guess what I've also done is I'm not listening to it much of the time.
Yeah. Say that. Yeah. It's amazing that we survived it all, you know, sort of thinking of, you know, before awakening kind of, and that constant agonite. Well, for me it was really, really negative, really awful. And like, how do you just want to sort of think back, like how does that's, you know, you survive that? It's just incredible, isn't it, when you sort of think about it? It's just, it can be torture.
But the nature of that shift is, you know, thinking about it tonight, I think it's more kind of on a body chemistry level than actually, you know, whatever the mind is thinking about, you know.
Yeah.
That reset back to a state of bliss. Bliss is a feeling in the body, really, mostly, you know. It's not about what's on the screen of my mind particularly, but normally one begets the other. You know, it's the chicken and the eggs that you spoke about. But yeah, I feel like that reset happens in my body chemistry. Really is, you know, in my emotional body, my heart, which creates this chemical feeling in my body.
Do you feel like it continues to get more positive, or is it just kind of always similarly kind of?
No, I'd say, I don't know, I mean, it went from, you know, 0 to 100.
Right.
And then, yeah, like you said, everything was bliss for a very long time.
Very good, that isn't it? Very nice.
Yeah, I probably got 5 years out of it, I'd say.
That's pretty good. Whoa, that must have been.
I chose my situation well. I lived on a beach in Thailand for
awesome. Yeah, 5 years of that, that's great.
I saw that if I came back here, it would probably change quite, well, it may, you know, it would be subject to influences that were not in alignment with how I was feeling and the beauty of nature around me.
Yeah, of course, because yes, natural, it just sounds like a natural environment to be in when you're in that, yeah, totally. Yeah.
But I don't know, is it doing that over time? Is the curve ever so slightly downwards? You know, I guess it's been 10, 12, 11 years.
You get used to it, I think, as
well.
well.
I think that's the thing, right?
I think Eckhart Tolle says that as well. He said that he was totally blissed out for 2 or 3 years, and then the bliss settled.
It normalises, you know. Oh, okay, so this is my baseline now, so yeah.
Yeah, well, Eckhart Tolle says it. It's the Edge King. Yeah.
Sorry.
I find that
I have no problem with Eckhart Tolle. He had a really deep awakening as far as I'm concerned. Yeah.
I think what I find though is maybe the reason why I feel like it's maybe slowly doing that is because as I normalise to this being my baseline state, When after a period of time that train of my unresolved stuff comes around and comes through the station, then yeah, the more I normalise, the less I am aware of the bliss. Bliss is just normal now. That kind of has a bit more of an effect. That feels a bit more real now. The bite of life or of my unresolved stuff tends to bite a little bit more when in the initial years when it's pure ecstasy, I'm untouchable.
Yeah.
But after a while, as that normalises, then yeah, shit just gets a bit more real.
Yeah.
Probably a good thing.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I guess we can't all do the, Ramana Maharshi. Mind you, he did work in the restaurant, Ramana, didn't he? He wasn't completely just sitting on samadhi reading his comics. Whatever he was doing. He read comic books, I think. I don't know what else he did, but nobody really knows much about what he did in his spare time.
I thought they said he just sat in his own poo.
Oh my god.
Is this recorded?
Well, I heard he had rats nibbling his knees. But that was, because when he was just living in the mountain, like, I don't know, yeah. Was he gods? Maybe. I don't know. What's wrong with saying that? It's alright.
Offended about 10 billion people.
The problem for me is you've planted an image in my mind that I have maybe some difficulty getting rid of. Perhaps.
I like it.
It really resonates with me, this idea of like our sort of factory default being no inner voice, and it's something that we learn because my experience, and I guess other people's experience, is that inner voice is in English or whatever your native language happens to be. So you're thinking in a human language. If you were just born in the wild, or for whatever reason you've never been around human beings who speak in a language, you wouldn't know what language was. You wouldn't have a language of your own to think in. So I guess you wouldn't have an inner voice, or if you did, it wouldn't be in words, like these sort of abstract symbols that you label, this is a lamp. If you did have any kind of inner monologue, it would be maybe more visual rather than like actual things that you see or hear, rather than these abstract labels, words that we give to things. So to me, it seems like, how could you have an inner voice if you had no language?
Yeah, and like when you're born, I guess it's a feeling, right? We can't say we're hungry, so we cry. Like that's me now. If I'm hungry, I'm like cry or scream. Not say I'm hungry. It takes Bob to say, Jen, you're hungry. Like quite literally, it's disassociation. I've got to learn really. I have to relearn all the time. So I guess when you're a child, but you have that voice, you're just natural. You're just. But then I hear what you were saying about it's a positive voice too. You know, that makes sense. Like to have ideas and things. So I guess it's.
So you have to be almost told you're hungry? Because that's like, that's interesting. Because
sometimes I'll confuse like tiredness and hunger because they're both the same feeling.
okay.
So I'll confuse happiness, joy and excite, like the words that we use, to me it's a feeling. So I just get quite overwhelmed and I'm like, squirrel! And it's like, it's okay, you can calm down.
Right.
Yeah, and happiness and sadness, you quite often confuse
Yeah, I'll
those
start
as
crying
well.
if I'm happy, which is quite normal I think, but over something silly we'll get a new lamp and I'll cry. An animal, I suppose.
With tiredness and hunger, I get that That's quite cool. When I lived with my ex, we'd come home and we'd always argue with each other, and then after we'd eaten, we'd realise it was purely because we were hungry and tired.
Yeah.
There's no other reason for it.
So the babies, the mother or whatever is always interpreting the cries that you're hungry, and you learn quickly.
So is that because of maybe for some people it's because of a lack of attunement from the parent who didn't say, oh, you're hungry, it's alright, you just need some food, or something like that. I don't know, I'm not saying that's what happened for you.
Yeah, so you're just, well, that's effective mirroring as well, so it's, you learn to associate, and it's, so integrating your emotions as well, so, if you're attuned to the baby, that's what it would be. It's always, because the desire is never your own. It's always been an interpretation from the beginning. Everything, sadness, you're sad, so it's always coming from outside. But ineffective attunement, where you don't really know who you are and what you want and all that kind of stuff. So.
Would you say it's seeking quiet, and it's almost, most people are seeking to not feel emotion? Because
To not feel emotion? Well,
yeah, because like when people say they have an awakening, it seems to be very quiet and very calm. Is that something that people seek? Is that a thing that people want then? Like you find like that stillness?
Well, often unconscious, because people wouldn't know what that is, I suppose. But I suppose the idea of peace, but then they wouldn't know what peace, unless it's been sort of remembered afterwards. But the cessation of desire and stuff. Because a lot of that, even in the initial awakening, is you'd have no idea how much you sort of think excitement, it's great, if you're hedonistic and everything, and then that dies, and the seeing of emptiness, that dies, and it's like, thank God that's gone, because it's just, actually it's upsetting your equilibrium, even the thrills and all the kind of, what you thought was great stuff and exciting and pleasurable was actually just disturbance. I mean, it's nice to have a bit of disturbance once in a while, but I suppose, but you have no, because you can't, that piece is, you have no idea what that's like. I'm sure, see that, it's like, because it's so absolute as well, when you've come just from suffering and it's just gone, it's so loving, and it's so like being held and beyond that, and it's like, what, because everything else is so conditional, isn't it? It's so actually small, like the human love is actually quite small in a way, and it's needy and all these things, and that is just so, and it's funny the way sort of ideas of God and all, all the kind of religious stuff kind of dissolves in that too, in a way, because it's so complete. I mean, it doesn't for everybody, but and who knows what this is, but because, like I say, I don't think there is any death. I really don't. I mean, I wouldn't know, but I'd be really surprised if there is. I'd just be like, ooh, there's a dead body. It's dawn. But I don't know. Yeah, because it's so not physical anymore, isn't it? So, don't know, biology is gone. Just,
is seeking it in a way, but they don't really know what they're seeking until it gets there. Until that peace comes, or until suffering stops, you don't actually realise the nature of the suffering. For example, I had, unbeknownst to me, I used to have really bad structural issues in my spine.
Uh-huh.
And then one day I experienced a connection, or a correction, and suddenly the pain that I'd been living with for decades stopped. But I was not aware that I was living with it. I would constantly be adjusting, but not really knowing that I was doing it until it went quiet, and then suddenly I was like, fucking hell.
Right.
I lived with that for decades, you know, and I was able to replay the tape and see my constant shifting and stretching, and that's what it was about. That's what I was trying to get to. Fuck.
Yeah,
But
okay.
it's only when it goes quiet that you realise the noise.
Yeah, it's true. Yeah. So there's no way of knowing. There's just no.
It's
Yeah.
just normal, right? It's just
Yeah.
part of your everyday thing, and it's kind of squelched out, you know? It's just tuned out. Oh yeah, I do that, and I do that. But I'm not aware that I'm doing that because I'm focusing on this. But yeah, when the silence comes, you're like, oh my God.
But it's a very quiet, oh my God, isn't it? It's a very subtle kind of a whisper.
But when I replay the tapes, you know, it's a great metaphor, because when I replay the tapes, I see all the shifting that I used to do. You know, I can see those adjustments and that I wasn't really conscious of. So I was trying to get somewhere. I was trying to change something in me,
Yeah.
even if I wasn't totally aware of it. In fact, I would say I was almost not aware of it. And I feel like this change is absolutely the same as that as well. You know, at the point of change, I was like, holy crap, why didn't anyone tell me, you know? And yet, when I replayed the tapes and looked at my life, I made a series of decisions, and I could see, you know, that each time that I came up against a suggestion that was this, you know, and I could see the trail of breadcrumbs that led forward to the point of me putting myself in that situation and being open to it, you know. So, yeah, just like the thing with the back, it was exactly the same. I kind of knew all I was seeking to do was end the suffering, but I couldn't quite conceive of what that actually meant. Or just reduce the suffering, right? Just do something about the suffering.
Yeah, that makes sense, doesn't it?
Yeah. But then I walked on to an absolute solution, and I'm like, wow, I wasn't ready for this. I'll take it.
You must have a lot of tapes. Is that like a regular thing? So you do that quite regularly, then just you're like talking, and when you've got issues and stuff, just talking it out?
No, the tapes are in my head.
Oh, right in your head.
Yeah.
Mine would be literal.
And the older I get, the more I find that they're being erased without me choosing it. But
Do you find that what you memory wise?
yeah.
Okay. All right.
Is that a thing?
What memory?
My memories.
Good.
Oh, is yours going that way or?
I think so, but I don't know if it's just aging.
A lot, well, a lot of people's experience is that, and also it's visited less often. But then again, if you've repressed a lot of stuff, you might get new stuff.
What's the difference between that phase where, like I heard about this, there's a new study where they measure depression in mice by seeing that they don't want to reproduce, eat, or compete. That sounds like an awakening. But is the difference that if it's an awakening thing, then your whole perspective on everything has shifted after the so-called depression?
Well, as perspective, I suppose it's just that's non-identification. I don't know what your perspective on not eating, what's...
Well, what's the from a medical or a clinical perspective? What's the difference between like someone who's depressed and someone who's actually going through something a bit different?
Well, so like the awakening to emptiness, because it could look like that from an outsider's perspective.
Or it's not like the blissed out phase, it's the more the nihilistic phase of like, oh, so it's not complete maybe, and it's just the,
yeah,
there's nobody here, there's no point, there's the going,
Well, yeah, the awakening to emptiness is like the desert period long,
Mm.
dark night of the soul.
Mm.
But it doesn't, it's not depression, it's not, because you know the difference if you've had a proper depression, it's not even apathy,
Mm.
it's not as strong as that, it's a kind of shrug, isn't it? Oh, go out, I'll tell you what, I'll buy you a new pair of shoes today, right, I'll go for, I don't know, like it's just more, I don't know, I just thought it was like nothing, I saw it as sort of like window shopping, nothing adds anything to you, nothing, there's no drive to even pleasure, it's just, everything's very equal, everything's almost like preferences do kind of die down in that period, like, you know, but nothing changes, but just, it's a leveling out, nothing really feeds you, whereas the ego, it always felt like, oh, look at me, I did that, or like something, it's always something adding or detracting, it just seemed like the end of that, and flattening out and a kind of going through the motions, but not as bad as going through the motions, because that sounds slightly negative, it's not like lying on your duvet going, fuck, it's just like, yeah, because depression is pain, it's real pain, like, and apathy is, it's kind of like depression, except it lifts, it's when you're with people, you're okay, but when you're away, you just cares. But, yeah, I did wonder, because I didn't know what that was when I was experiencing it, so I do know that I thought maybe something wrong here, except that it was a relief in one sense, and that, like you were saying, it's just some of the, I missed, I didn't miss anything, but in a way I could have said I missed the highs and lows, but I kind of, you don't really feel strong enough to miss anything, that's a kind of energy that's gone as well. I'm glad I didn't know in a sense, because I think I'd be just wanting that love, that wanting to see that, and didn't know there was that.
I think almost that's the difference between depression as well, like it's having or knowing love and not, like if someone's severely depressed, there's absolutely zero love in their body, they feel that way, and there's complete disconnection between mind, body, soul. It's just nothingness in a negative way, not in a opening way, it's in a closed way, because nothing's coming in, nothing's going out, it's just complete shutdown of endorphins,
Yes, death of the self, death of the authentic self, and in anger turned inward as well. It's just
self-hate.
Yeah, it's when you give up as well. I think you express yourself, and then it's Some people they describe just, I suppose, more sort of feeling like that on an ongoing basis. But if you've had proper episodes of it, I've had proper episodes of it, like, when you're in a depression, because, my God, it might be for a few moments, or you might seem, but it's like, you're in the shit, and you're feeling like shit until it's over, like, and it's, like, it's fun, isn't it?
I guess if there's nowhere to go, right, if there's no way out of that state, then that is literally where just implosion without any possibility of escape. In the years that preceded my shift in life, in those last 2 years, I've kind of experienced like an existential meltdown.
Right.
And like 2 years of of just like my whole identity just imploding and everything that I built imploding. But the crucial thing was I had an idea that I had to do something, you know, and that was to travel, to get out from everything that I built, the whole persona, the whole thing, and just a Hail Mary to step out, you know. So kind of everything about me kind of crumbled, but that kind of left me free in a sense, I see, to walk away from the wreckage just naked and small. But if I couldn't have gotten out of that situation, then it would have just come down on top and I would have been buried in the rubble and nowhere to go, you know. But I feel like I was fortunate that I had an escape hatch. You know, I had a plan and an impulse that I knew I needed to get out of this life, this thing that I'd built.
How soon after was the awakening then? Was it imminent? Like
It took 3 weeks from the point of leaving the country, yeah.
Yeah, because it doesn't surprise me that there's something about absolutely falling apart, isn't there? And yeah, like because there's something even in depression. There's still there can be a little bit of fight or something, and then you just something overwhelms you, and you're like, you're really screwed.
Yeah, I mean, you know, it was full of fear. There was loads of fear around, but there was, you know, there was at least a play that I could make. You know?
Okay.
But if you had nowhere to go, then I don't even think you probably don't even feel fear. You just feel despair and everything just.
Yeah, you're even beyond because most people who commit suicide or anything, it's when they're coming out of that because they just don't have the energy.
Mm.
So yeah, it's too bleak even for that.
Yeah. But yeah, as it turned out, you know, when I look at the process, it was a fundamental part of why, you know, of how that was. The old Bob had to die, man. A controlled demolition of that self, rather than have it come down on me, you know, without me being able to do anything about it.
Whoa.
But you know, it sounds very kind of thought out, and you know, at the time, man, I just couldn't do anything else. You know what I mean? It was a total long shot. I was desperate. My desperation actually was the thing that carried me through. But
were you kind of isolated as well at the time? Or?
I guess I was. Yeah, I spent most of that. I spent a large part of that 2 years on my own.
There really is no escape then, is there? Like, ooh, you really, yikes.
Yeah, looking around at the, you know, the things, you know, the things that defined me, and realising that this is all going, and sitting there and going, who am I, man? Without all of this, who am I?
Ooh, it's so painful being stripped naked like that. Like, it is, it's just, it all seems so important, doesn't it? And you're just clinging to that, and oh my god, it has to be taken from you. There's no going, oh, I'll just surrender.
I mean, the series of events that led to that, the implosion of the kind of structure of my life was a gift, as it turned out, and I wouldn't have pulled the plug on it. You know, I wouldn't. It had to collapse on me, or at least to be toppling.
You couldn't. You just couldn't. No. So you couldn't, because that is
I'm the game, man. You know, my salary turns up every month, and you know, I've got evidence that this might still work out. But once that gets taken away, then it's like, run, man, run. Yeah. I really liked what you said about language and about words as well. I was thinking, is it a thing? Did somebody once say that language is violence? Or do I really get that kind of what it causes, you know, against the simplicity of her with, you know, pictures and colours and pictures of fluffy sheep. And, but yeah, when I think about the nature of language as well, and the nature of the mind that needs to express through language, so it needs to categorise and you know, isolate and identify and categorise in order to do that. And something came to me the other week. I was like, intelligence or knowledge is like is a picked flower. It's no longer connected to the nature and that it's a part of. The moment I pick it, it's still a beautiful flower, but it's kind of lost something really important to it, and it's on its way to dying. And I feel like everything that I isolate in my mind in order to be able to categorise it and classify it so that I can use it is also of that nature, and that's the difference between the knowledge that lives in my mind and the knowing that is nature, without me interfering with it. So I feel like in our needing to use language in order to express that kind of naturally happens, and it kind of flattens and makes one-dimensional, sort of commits to paper something that was previously alive and three-dimensional and pulsing, and now it's just flattened out in order that we can communicate. Yeah, I feel like it kind of rips the heart out of the life experience, Yeah.
Also, I think when you realise the limitations of language and how restrictive it is, and how it boils things down to very limited concepts, and even like in English we only have the word love, whereas in other languages they have, like in Greek, or there's 4 different kinds of love. There's agape and eros, and I don't know. You don't realise how your way of thinking is being restricted. Like the Eskimos with 50 words for snow, or I don't know how to do it, but it's extraordinary how your experience, you have a feeling and you label it, and then you, like the dictionary definition or the society definition of love or anger or whatever, and you're so tied up with that definition, and a word that I discovered really recently is compersion, which is the opposite of jealousy. So jealousy, if you see your lover being intimate with someone else, that's jealousy. But in the polyamorous community, compersion is the opposite of jealousy. It's feeling joy at seeing your lover being intimate with someone else. Compersion.
Oh, weird. Right. Okay.
And if you didn't have a word for that, it's like this void where there's, because you can't attach a label on it, therefore you can't relate to it, you can't talk about it, you can't talk to other people about it. As soon as you have a word, then the mind can grab onto that and start weaving its web of thoughts around this new word. It's extraordinary. And I think that happens a lot in the polyamorous community, is that they invent all these new words for feelings that they have, and English language is not designed to express these things.
Well, it's good for negative stuff as well, because it gives you distance towards, obviously, something bad you're experiencing, to articulate that. So, but it's also death of the thing. Like, once you say I love you, it's over.
I feel like I want to be an advocate for language and thought.
Language and thought is great.
So I understand the direct knowing, non-conceptual direct knowing thing, and I appreciate that. And I feel like I've fallen in love again with the whole, but more language like spells and magic. So there's different energy behind it, there's different intentions. Like it helps to connect and create. It's like a whole other aspect I've discovered to it. So I want to stand up for language a little bit.
Thanks. Good.
I guess using language like in poetry, that's very different from a kind of intellectual, analytical way of using language.
It's like it's pointing to, I think for poetry it's pointing to the nameless. That's a good distinction, because I think maybe magic is something different. The magic isn't pointing to something, but it is pointing something. It's directing energy in a very intentional, clear, direct way that has impact. I don't know, maybe I've gone mad. I'm watching too much Netflix.
And poetry's got a lot of metaphors, but it's a lot of the right side of the brain as well, so it's fused with a lot of feeling and image, and I think that's why it's kind of juicy. I love poetry. It's really powerful.
I guess that's the difference, that when you're listening to poetry, you know that you're meant to take it literally, which is very different from a kind of like a scientific use of language where you're being very precise and analytical and labelling things as precisely as you can. But as you say, like poetry, it's pointing you at something. You're not meant to be taking it word for word. It's like what feelings does it evoke? Like this sort of similes and metaphors. It's expanding out of words into the sort of the unspeakable.
Yeah, like religion does. Religion is the same thing, right? It's a finger pointing, and yet people often forget you're not supposed to take it literally, and they end up worshipping the finger rather than what's being pointed at.
Got 1 minute.
I've got a quick.
Yeah,
no,
go for
this is
it.
quick, but you mentioned losing touch with the sense of contraction over time, or how it felt to have that sense of contraction. And I was wondering if like the opposite happens, like if the apparent sense of self was never there, do you kind of remember times from your past where you were like, oh, that was a time that actually felt quite realised, I just didn't know it? Moments or experiences or anything, I don't know.
I did, I mean, because I had some sort of awakening kind of thing, a sort of glimpse about 20 years ago, and I didn't realise that's what that was until more recently. Sort of, yeah, like, I guess so, but it just, I have no context for it. It's just kind of annoying, but yeah. You start to remember. A lot of people do that when they wake up and they're sort of like, oh, when I was a kid I remember being like that. Is that what you kind of mean, or?
That, and maybe just average moments where you just feel like, you know, maybe something like feeling really happy about something and just losing that sense of self and just remembering like, oh, that one time was really strong actually. It was almost like the feeling of...
Oh, a lot of people talk about that. Maybe in my own history there wasn't ever any space between the scream and the insurance. I don't know. But that is quite common, because like it's supposed to be all the time. There's like, people just don't really notice the gaps. Probably, if I really thought about it, but I can't really think of anything off the top of my head, there would have been moments, I'm sure. I mean, Maslow talked about peak experiences often like that, just a woman at her kitchen suddenly feeling at ease and a sort of sense of gratitude for everything normal in life, you know, and then it's just for a few minutes and then back, you know, ruminating and all that. So maybe, yeah, because it's funny, you do, when something happens like that, and it's weird the way suddenly something flags up, because I didn't really remember about the awakening to emptiness, because I didn't really talk about that, and it was just like, well, that was really stark, and then, you know, like, you know, afterwards things start to come back and sort of realise. I take it you've had quite a few of those moments, probably.
Yeah, just it might seem like nothing, you know, like, for example, once when I was like in my early teens and we moved house, and it was just this moment where our stuff was all moved, but we didn't have anything to do, we had nothing, I was just playing PlayStation, and my mum came up and asked me if I wanted to get pizza, but there was just this feeling of just nothingness, but content. I was content with the nothingness, like there was nothing to do, and it just felt very similar to glimpses I've had now of,
Okay. Yeah.
like it's almost like a taste of a glimpse, or a glimpse of a glimpse.
Yeah. Sounds like it. Yeah. Oh, it's after 9. We better. If anybody wants to come to the pub, we're going to go to the King William. If you fancy, if there's any room in it, or if you can squash it, we're like, ouch.